The world had grown used to silence from the Vatican. For years, announcements came wrapped in ritual, tradition, and careful words. But everything changed the moment Pope Leo XIV stepped forward. No one expected it. No signs were given. No leaks. No whispers. Just a sudden global announcement that stunned the entire Catholic world. There he stood, Pope Leo XIV, calm, focused, holding no documents, reading no notes. It was just him, and the truth he could no longer keep inside. His face was serious, but his eyes burned with clarity. He spoke, and instantly the world knew this was no ordinary address. "I speak to you not as a ruler," he began, "but as a servant of the truth. What I am about to say may disturb many, but it must be said." From the very beginning of his speech, it was clear. He was not going to offer comfortable words. He was not here to protect image or tradition. He was here to reveal, to awaken, to shake the foundation of centuries, not in rebellion, but in honesty. He spoke of silence, of how too many things had been hidden, buried, forgotten. He said that silence was no longer an option, not for him. He had waited. He had prayed. And now, it was time to act. With powerful simplicity, he said, "The Church must change. And that change begins with me." He paused, not for effect, but for breath, for strength. Then he continued. He declared that from this day forward, he would lead the Church into a new era of transparency, that all records, all operations under the Vatican's care would be reviewed, cleaned, and shared with the people of God. No more secrets. No more closed doors. But it wasn't just about documents. He went deeper. He spoke of his own personal reflection, of long nights in prayer, questioning not his faith, but the institution he now led. He admitted his own doubts, not in Christ, but in the way power had been used in Christ's name. "I do not fear judgment from men," he said, "but I do fear the judgment of God, should I stay silent." He revealed that for months he had withdrawn, not out of illness or pressure, but to prepare his soul, to speak not as a politician or a manager, but as a shepherd ready to face the storm. And now, standing before the world, he laid out what he called a spiritual emergency. He spoke of luxury. He spoke of pride. He spoke of forgetting the poor, of forgetting humility. He admitted that even inside the highest offices of the Church, true service had been replaced by comfort and image. And he said simply, "This ends now." He announced that he himself would give up all symbols of wealth. No more red shoes, no more gold, no more private comforts. "I will live simply," he said, "as Christ lived simply." He had already begun moving to a smaller residence, eating the same meals as his staff, and refusing special treatment. But it wasn't just about his life. It was about his voice. He said he would now speak freely, boldly, without fear of tradition. He promised not to hide behind formal language or ceremonial gestures. "I will call wrong what is wrong," he said, "even if it costs me everything." And then he made a promise that he would never again issue a public statement unless he truly believed it came from his heart and his conscience, not from pressure or politics. The announcement wasn't a list of changes. It was a confession, a declaration of personal accountability, a moment of total vulnerability. The leader of the Catholic Church stood before billions and admitted, "We have not done enough, I have not done enough, but I will do more, starting now." He spoke directly to every person watching, not as a pope, but as a man. He said, "You may be angry, you may be confused, you may have lost hope, but I am here now to rebuild, not with stone, but with truth." There was no arrogance in his tone, only honesty. He said he didn't know what the future would bring, but he was ready to walk through it even alone if that's what it would take. In the final moments of his message, he looked into the camera, not with drama, but with calm, and said something that will be remembered for generations. "I will not be silent. I will not pretend. I will not play a role. I will walk the narrow road, even if it leads through fire. Because I believe in the gospel, I believe in love, and I believe that truth is the only way forward." Then he stepped back. No music, no blessing, no farewell. just a quiet exit. But the echo of his words continued. For the first time in a long time, people weren't talking about tradition or ceremony. They were talking about courage, about truth, about a pope who had chosen to speak not just to the church but to every soul listening. This was not a performance. This was a turning point. Pope Leo XIV didn't announce a new doctrine. He didn't change theology. What he changed was tone. What he broke was the silence, and what he offered was himself. No guards, no filter, no mask, just one man in white, willing to risk it all for the truth he could no longer ignore. Now the world watches, not just to see what happens next, but to ask, what happens when a leader decides to be real? Pope Leo XIV has made his choice, and it has already begun. The cameras may have turned off, the curtains may have closed, but something had already shifted in the hearts of millions. In parishes, in homes, in quiet corners of the world, people whispered, "Did you hear what the Pope said?" It wasn't just the content, it was the feeling, the sense that finally someone had spoken without calculation. But Pope Leo XIII did not stop there. In the days that followed, he chose to remove the traditional pomp from Vatican affairs. He stopped the motorcade processions. He walked through the gardens alone. He began meeting staff in silence, not in conference rooms but in chapels. No reporters, no photographs, just prayer, just truth. He had become the most powerful religious figure in the world. But instead of holding that power, he poured it out. He was determined to return to the roots of faith, service, humility, integrity. Every morning he would rise early, before the bells rang, and walk barefoot into the chapel. Witnesses said he spent hours in silent prayer, not performing, not rehearsing, just praying. They saw a man at war with his own comfort, saw a man whose shoulders bore the weight of history and conscience. And then came the second wave of his message, not in the form of another televised speech, but through action. He ordered an immediate review of all Vatican assets, every property, every bank transaction, every title. "Nothing holy can be built on secrecy," he was quoted saying. For the first time, full financial audits were made available to the public. Centuries of silence opened. People didn't know whether to applaud or be afraid. But Pope Leo XIV wasn't looking for applause. He quietly dissolved long-standing offices that had become symbolic more than useful. He stripped titles that had no purpose other than prestige. He urged clergy everywhere to stop competing for honor and instead compete in humility. He began to replace lavish events with small, deeply reflective prayer services. No fanfare, just truth. Observers expected backlash, they expected resistance. But what they didn't expect was that the people began returning. Young people. The lost, the disillusioned. Something had touched their souls, not tradition, not theology, but the simple sound of truth, spoken without fear. Pope Leo XIV became known not for what he owned or wore, but for what he gave up, for how he wept in silence, for how he apologized, for how he said, "I too am in need of mercy." There were days he would speak to no one, not out of distance, but out of reflection. He knew the weight of his voice. He didn't want to waste a single word. He told his closest aides, "Every word from my lips must first be tested in silence." He didn't tour the world. He didn't give dozens of interviews. He simply walked the halls of St. Peter's in quiet humility, as if trying to make peace with the ghosts of the past. And when he did speak, it pierced. One evening, without warning, he opened the doors of the basilica and invited ordinary families to sit with him in prayer. No schedule, no cameras, just candles, silence, and the sound of breathing. That night, people who had never set foot in church again wept.